Pues soy Susanna Temkin y soy la curadora del Museo del Barrio. El museo es una institución muy interesante y muy importante en la historia de Nueva York porque es una institución fundada por artistas, educadores y también padres puertorriqueños en 1969, como una institución que puede enseñar qué es la cultura puertorriqueña a los hijos que en las escuelas no sabían quiénes son. Um, Actually, when I came to Duke, I thought that I would be a history major. I had always taken Spanish classes in high school, and I knew I wanted to keep up the language. I wanted to do the study abroad program in Madrid that everybody spoke so highly of. So I started to take classes, and I fell in love with the department. And especially through Esther Guevara's classes, I started to incorporate the Spanish courses with art history, which was my second major. And over time, it just kind of developed naturally that I wanted to go to graduate school and focus on Latin American art history specifically. Well, I think now, with the passage of time, Latin American art history, Latin American history in general, and also Latinx studies have become much more common across the United States. But when I was in school, I didn't realize how fortunate I was to have a professor like Esther Guevara, who was teaching these courses, because when I got to graduate school, I was working with a professor, Edward Sullivan, who works on Latin American art history, but I was one of the only students who had had any exposure, any scholarly exposure, or any experience researching Latin American art and Latin American artists prior to entering graduate school. So I was really ahead. And today, fortunately, that has changed, and now there's many colleagues across universities, but at the time, I was really one of the only people at my graduate school who had had that experience. So I work at El Museo del Barrio, which is an institution that was founded in 1969. Actually, we're going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary next year. And this is a really special place. Even though we're quite a small institution located within the larger cultural arts sphere of New York City, we're unique in that we were dedicated from its very start to originally Puerto Rican art and culture, but now since the 1990s, we've been dedicating our focus to not only Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, but also to Latin America and also artists of the diaspora, Latinx artists. So having the ability to communicate with artists across the region, having a background in the art, the language, the history through Duke has really made it possible for me to connect with the different audiences that we serve and also with the artists that I work with and the performers. I think being able to be nimble. I was a Spanish major along with an art history major, and actually having Professor Esther Guevara, who straddled those two courses, showed me the different possibilities that you could do with that career. I didn't always know that I was going to be a curator. I thought maybe I would be an art historian, more focused on research. But I think having the ability to work directly with people and to achieve different projects has really helped me sort of achieve where I am in my career now. I think that something that Duke was doing at the time that I was there, and now it seems like it's even more obvious and that it's a more common practice, is having these connections across departments. So I wish I had taken more courses that were not strictly always in the Spanish department, but that had more connections with some of the other departments across the board. I think that some of the classes that I took that were having these connections, these interdisciplinary connections were some of the most interesting courses that I took, and that have helped me farther in life, that taught me different research practices than I was used to. And being able to have that sort of nimble approach to different topics is, especially in the museum industry where you're constantly working on different projects, is really critical.
And can you talk a little about your personal background and how that influenced your interests in Spanish and Latin American culture?
Sure, yeah. So when I came to Duke, I'm from Miami originally, and I am the child of a Cuban mother but an American father. We didn't speak Spanish at home, so even though I always had an ear for Spanish, I'm not a native speaker, so I knew that I needed to improve my language abilities, which is what I did through the language-specific courses, and then also learn more about my personal history through taking historical courses about the culture. I think for me, being a Latina or being a Latinx, a person from the Latinx generation, I really want to make our histories visible, especially right now in the current climate. I think that there are so many of us. There's more of us who come from these varied histories, whether it's Latinx or another diasporic background, that I feel a responsibility to be able to showcase that. So when I approach art, I really want to approach it from a very as inclusive a manner as possible.
And are there any Latinx or just broadly art pieces that you've exhibited at El Museo del Barrio that you really love or that maybe have an interesting story behind them?
Right now we're exhibiting a show that's coming from the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and I think it's so important that actually these works by Latinx artists, by artists from a Latin American background, are included in the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And we have an artist named Hiram Maristani who is really a figurehead of the East Harlem neighborhood where El Museo del Barrio is located. And for me, I've really developed a nice relationship with him, learning about just the hyper-local climate of East Harlem and thinking about how his dedication to this community can apply to artists not only from East Harlem, but from other neighborhoods, other states, other places, including Latin America, and to see how these connections speak to an individual's practice.